We love giving you this podcast for free, and with your help we can keep it free. So how can you help the Rufus Project? Well, first up, try sharing the podcast on social media. Hey, let your friends know about the competitions we run, or even just your favourite bits. You can even review us on iTunes, or just simply give us a bit of feedback through our Facebook, Twitter, Podomatic or YouTube pages. You know, that's going to make us feel pretty good about giving you this stuff. If you do happen to have a little bit of spare cash around, why not head to the rufusproject.podomatic.com and hit the donate button. We are hoping to also set up a bit of a reward scheme for those of you who are generous enough to donate. And finally, if you have a product or service you think may be of interest to the Rufus Project listeners, then please contact us at rufusreviews@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Now on with the podcast. Hello and welcome to the Rufus Project. I'm your host Trevor Holland, and a little later on you will be hearing from my good friend and co-host Kristian Fletcher. And what do we have in store for you this time around? Well, let me tell you, it's a bit of a mixed bag, but it's still going to be lots of fun. Well, we're going to discuss Hercules movies, old and new. Some interesting insights in that lot, let me tell you. We had the 40th anniversary of Phantom of the Paradise coming up, and Kristian's going to give you a bit of a rundown on this classic, yet strangely still obscure movie. I'm trying something new with the gaming segment, so you'll just have to wait and see what that is. We've also got another Cards for Sorrow interactive screening of the Rocky Horror Picture Show coming up on September 19, and this time Kristian takes on the role of interviewer and interviews one of the dodgier cast members. Again, you'll just have to wait to find out who that is. Of course, we've got the highlights of the geek news for the past fortnight. Kristian will take you through his upcoming events. And, well, we've actually got a couple of great competitions for you to enter this time around. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast. Yep, it's time to have a look at what's been grabbing our attention in the geek news. And straight off the top, the lead stories this time around are all very much television based. Well, first up, unless you're the sort of person that ignores pretty much anything that happens on normal TV, you'll know that the brand new episode of Doctor Who featuring Peter Capaldi screens across the planet, giving us our first full taste of this new Doctor. Of course, I checked it out as early as possible on Sunday morning, and yes, I have confidence that Peter Capaldi is going to be a very good Doctor. If you haven't seen it yet, definitely give it a try. It does have a few problems and a few nice big plot holes, but look, it's not old school Who, which was insane detailed because of the sheer amount of time they spent on a single storyline, but it is fun and it is certainly showing promise. Hey, they even gave Clara some character this time around. That was a nice change. Now, it wasn't as insane as some people who got up super duper early. You see, the ABC actually took the rather extreme step of screening the first episode at the same time as it was showing in the UK. We're talking like 3-4 o'clock in the morning in Australia here. And yes, I do have friends who did get up that early. Like I said, I waited until a more civilized time before checking it out myself because I like my sleep on a Sunday. But the good news for my friends who want to continue with this craziness is that the ABC has confirmed that they will be simulcasting every single episode of the season as it screens in the UK. That's what I call fast tracking, and unlike Foxtel, you don't have to pay $100 a month to enjoy it. After this great announcement, surely the other channels will follow suit and start making moves that will actually appeal to the viewers in order to get the people back from downloads or streaming or accessing Netflix via VPN. Of course, let's have a look. What did Channel 7 and Channel 9 announce this week? Well, they announced that they would like an extra 7 minutes of advertising time during prime time. They're allowed to have up to 13 minutes of ads. They've asked to take it up to 20 minutes. And Channel 10 has said they don't like the idea because they don't get as much revenue per ad as the other stations do, so it would just basically increase the gap in the funding from advertising between the two big channels and poor old Channel 10, who's coming up in third there. Of course, the final say as to whether or not to change the regulations to allow more advertising lies with our great communication minister, Malcolm Turnbull, who has come out attacking the ABC, wanting to basically slash government funding and make them seek their own alternative funding methods. So, how does Mr. Commercial Malcolm Turnbull think of this request? He doesn't like it. He's actually balked at it. So I think it's pretty obvious that Channel 7 and Channel 9 are really probably pushing a bit too far. Because I tell you what, the chance to watch even more ads during prime time certainly makes it more appealing for me to go back to those stations. How about you? Oh, a bunch of twats. Anyway, moving on from television, another story came out that's a bit closer to my retro gaming heart. When talking about what they've got planned for 2015, the Westfield Corporation has stated that they're looking at updating their malls and bringing in a little something extra to appeal to the youth market. They're focusing on the youth centres with this particular plan. They intend to bring in the young punters by installing pinball machines in their malls. Frankly, I say I don't care about the youth market. You put some good pinballs in there, especially the Twilight Zone. Look, seriously, the Twilight Zone, best pinball in existence. You install some of those suckers in my local Westfield, I'm guaranteeing I'm going to be there a lot more often just to play those things. Oh, I love a big solid pinball. Incidentally, speaking of electronic pinball, a bit later on this week, perhaps even on the night I post the podcast, I actually do have another virtual pinball that I'll be visiting and probably live streaming on the Ustream channel. Now, of course, what would the Rufus Project Geek news be without a little look at what the Australian government is up to when it comes to our internet habits? Now, I did briefly talk last time about their intention to retain metadata for a period of 2 years, and it's been quite an interesting thing to watch. There's been a lot of conflicting reports and information coming from the Australian government, quite often from the same person in the one interview. Look up George Brandis' interview on Sky News and you'll see what I mean. But to help us out, the discussion paper on the metadata retention has actually leaked and given a bit of a rundown of the sort of things they're looking at having stored. They're talking about stuff such as names and addresses of account holders, which the ISPs have anyway, are accessible by a warrant or a court order. They want information that can trace the source of a communication and the device that was used for that communication. But they don't want to keep web browsing history. So if they want to look at where that was accessed from or who has been accessing a particular site, and they're saying that they're using this to fight terrorism, but they're not keeping browsing histories, not too sure how they're going to do that. Interesting though, one of the other aspects that they do want to keep, now keep in mind again, they're saying they're using this to fight terrorism and have actually specifically stated it's not about monitoring people's download habits. So I'm a bit curious as to why they want download and upload volumes of users kept as part of the metadata. I'm really not convinced with their intention on this one. Just going to say that straight up. And to finish off the news on, I suppose, a much lighter note, a comic which originally sold back in 1938 for the grand total of 10 cents has sold this week at auction for US $3,207,852. What sort of comic deserves this kind of markup, I hear you ask? Well, what it is a excellent condition copy of Action Comics #1. Now, this was the comic that first introduced us to Superman, which also makes it the comic that first introduced us to the concept of the comic book superhero. Essentially, if you are into any of the superheroes now, this comic book is their ultimate ancestor. There's still a few of these floating around. They're very hard to find, and as you can see, they are very, very valuable. Since I don't have a game to review this podcast, I thought I'd try something a little different. Now, this is something I have been thinking about for a little while now, and I thought, what better time to start than with a podcast with no game review? So instead of reviewing something new, I thought I would look at discussing games that have a great significance. Those sort of games that really do either change the playing field or bring something new, or are just plain fun, even if technically they shouldn't be. You know, they break the mold, they try something new, and they give you a fresh experience that's very, very enjoyable. What to call this section? Well, what else? The games you must play. And look, okay, I'll be honest, I'm going to start with a very easy target. The Portal series. Developed by Valve Software, the Portal games really took on a life of their own, winning numerous awards and spawning a million memes across the net. I'm sure everyone out there has come across The Cake is a Lie at some point, and if you haven't played Portal before, guess what? That's the game it comes from. But you can expect way more than an overused internet joke from these games. The core gameplay is deceptively simple. You have a gun, but instead of shooting bullets and mowing down your enemies as most first-person shooters, this one lets you fire two portals, or holes in space. And these two holes connect. So for instance, as a very basic example, you're at the bottom of a hole, and you can see a wall at the top that you can shoot a portal on. Shoot one portal directly in front of you, one portal up the top, and up to the top you go. Throw in hazards like insta-death water below you, angled walls, the ability to maintain your momentum as you fall or jump through a portal, as well as very intelligent level design, and you've already got a very effective and enjoyable puzzle game that lets you use the grey matter in a slightly different way. But before I discuss the elements that raise this from basic clever puzzle game to realm of masterpiece, let's have a little look at the history of the game. This massively popular blockbuster title actually had pretty humble beginnings. A group of students at DigiPen Institute of Technology called themselves Nuclear Monkey Software, and they developed a little game called Nabacular Drop. In this game, Princess No Knees, so named because she has no knees, so can't jump, gets the ability to make two gigantic portals and needs to use it to escape from a castle. This rather nifty device got the students quite a bit of recognition and more than a few awards. It also brought them to the attention of Valve Studio, who contacted them, hired them, and put them to work on making a, I suppose, more commercial version of their concept. From this came the first Portal game, which itself was meant to be a bit of a tech demo. It wasn't really meant to be a full product, but as they developed the game further and further, it soon became obvious that they had something pretty special. So in 2007, Portal was released in the Orange Box, a game bundle pretty much showcasing some of Valve's top work. It included the complete Half-Life 2 saga, the very popular Team Fortress 2, a multiplayer shooter, and introducing Portal. Portal was an instant classic, largely thanks to the wonderfully talented Alan McLean, who voiced the sinister, yet strangely adorable, psychotic artificial intelligence known as GLaDOS.
Wait, this next test does require some explanation. Let me give you the fast version. There. If you have any questions, just remember what I said in slow motion.
Since the main character, Shell, is actually completely silent throughout the game, this added so much character to the game, and the sort of dark humour which frankly still stands strong even today. But even Portal, as fantastic as it was still just a sample. Fast forward another 4 years to 2011, and Portal 2 hits the scene, keeping the core puzzle gameplay but adding in even more elements, like light bridges, aerial faith plates that fling you across the room, and even cooperative puzzles. We get to more fully explore the Aperture Science laboratories, where all this takes place, meet another artificial intelligence, a very charming, if slightly bumbling, British robot called Wheatley.
Okay, alright, so, I've got an idea, but it is bloody dangerous. Here we go. Ah! Oh, for God's... They told me that if I ever turned this flashlight on, I would die. They told me that about everything. I mean, I don't even know why they bothered giving me this stuff if they didn't want me to use it. It's pointless. Mad.
And get to listen to a few recordings by Cave Johnson, the original founder of Aperture Science. And trust me, the reward for getting through these games, well look, you will never forget it. And trust me, it will put a massive smile on your face. And really, I guess that is the core of these games. The fantastic feeling you get from solving a tricky puzzle, from getting to the next room and hearing the next line of fantastic and hilarious dialogue from these various artificial intelligences, and of course, the absolute epic closeout of both the games. Now, if you're going to give these games a try, this is what I recommend. Start with Portal. It can be picked up very cheaply through Steam, but if you want to play it on, say, the PlayStation 3 or the Xbox 360, that might be a little bit more problematic. It's only available through the orange box for these other console platforms, so you may have to do a little bit of hunting around through the pre-owned games at your local game shop, or maybe look online. Then you should probably look at where it all came from. Nabacular Drop is available for free download off the net. You can actually go to the DigiPen website where it is still available. It is a little buggy and some of the puzzles are a bit frustrating. I guess you don't have to play all the way through it, but like I said, it's definitely worth having a look and having a try. Look, it's not going to cost you anything, so what have you got to lose? Seriously. And of course, round it all out by heading to Portal 2. And definitely have an explore around. There's a few little, shall we say, Easter eggs hidden around, particularly if you have played through the Half-Life games. Again, it's available on Steam. If you hold out for a little bit, you can pretty much get it nice and cheap on a Steam sale. They happen very regularly with Portal 2 involved. Or, of course, you can try to track down a copy of the PlayStation 3 version. So there you go. The Portal series. Games you must play. And if that doesn't convince you, I'm going to have one more attempt with one of my favourite bits of dialogue from Portal 2, where we hear Cave Johnson giving it his all with GLaDOS, let's say, admiring him. And of course, if you do play the Portal games or have played them previously, let me know your thoughts. But now, here's Cave.
Alright, I've been thinking. When life gives you lemons, don't make lemonade. Make life take the lemons back. Get mad! I don't want your damn lemons! What am I supposed to do with these?
Take the lemons.
Demand to see life's manager. Make life rue the day it thought it could give Cave Johnson lemons. Do you know who I am? I'm the man who's gonna burn your house down with the lemons.
Oh, I like this guy.
I'm gonna get my engineers to invent a combustible lemon that burns your house down.
Burn his house down. Burning people. He says what we're all thinking.
20th Century Fox presents Phantom of the Paradise, a gothic horror story.
What was that?
Let's go back to Halloween 1974.
Film company 20th Century Fox bravely releases this independent feature called Phantom of the Paradise by director Brian De Palma. Before he became a force to be reckoned with the horror film Carrie, more importantly Scarface from 1983, there was this little-known glam horror rock musical campy spoof, I suppose you could call it. The film did rather bad business, and the only place it's found that it actually went well was Winnipeg in Canada, where it played for over a year and came back sporadically on screens. Brisbane audiences are more familiar with Phantom of the Paradise, as it used to screen as a double bill at the old Valley Twin Cinemas with the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Whether it's a good thing it gets lumped in with Rocky Horror, I don't know, because before the Rocky Horror Picture Show, there was Phantom of the Paradise. Loosely adapted and including a mixture of Phantom of the Opera and also the picture of Dorian Gray, Phantom of the Paradise takes the story of a young writer called Winslow, who intends to have his music played when Swan opens his famed music venue, the Paradise. When his cantata, based on Faust, is stolen by Swan, Winslow takes revenge as the masked villain of the Phantom of the Opera story. Amongst this is camp humour, 60s surf rock songs, and very early 70s glam. It could almost be seen as an inspiration for Kiss and Alice Cooper, very much happening at the peak of glam rock, and probably happening just at the time when it was on its way out. The lead actress, Jessica Harper, may also be known to cult movie fans as being the star of Shock Treatment, the Rocky Horror sequel from 1981. I recently interviewed Jessica Harper about her work with the movie, and she really enjoyed it as it was her first movie, and Brian De Palma was such a great director to her that it felt like fun. It wasn't a job to her. And I think this being her first film, it managed to actually kind of pigeonhole her in these more offbeat roles that she did end up playing. As recent as a couple of years ago, she was performing the song Old Souls from Phantom of the Paradise at a convention. See, conventions for this movie are now starting to pop up around the place, with cast members and crew coming out and revealing their stories about the making of the film. So what's something that was very much shrouded in mystery and sort of came and went at the time, people are now appreciating almost 40 years later. It was panned by many critics. However, 40 years later, through digital means, people are now able to see this film and experience it and enjoy it. It has since acquired such a loyal cult following, and a lot of fans have come out of the woodwork. Did you know Daft Punk are big fans? In early 2013, they actually met with director Brian De Palma to explore possible Phantom of the Paradise-related possibilities. Nothing has happened as yet due to the success of Random Access Memories, their latest album. I'm sure we may hear things in the future about this plan. Just look at the style of some of the outfits they wear. It's very much like the Phantom in Phantom of the Paradise. We're really excited to be able to bring this movie to the big screen, digitally remastered, on Friday the 12th of September at New Globe Theatre. Come along and experience a movie which may have been a bit shunned by the critics when it first came out, but it's time for you to appreciate it in its full form and where it actually belongs, on the big screen and with an audience of people.
My music is for Phoenix. Only she can sing it. Anyone else that tries dies. Phoenix.
Well, you told me one time that you'd be somebody, that you weren't working just to survive.
No matter how fast you run, no matter how far you go, the beast will follow. Man cannot escape his fate. Hercules.
Hercules, the new release one, starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, sees the main character, Hercules obviously, at the end of his 12 great tasks. A legend among the Greek people, he is hired by the King of Thrace, played by John Hurt, to help him win a battle against a very cunning and apparently nasty enemy. This is really all the setup you need, because what follows is largely either big battle action scenes or extended sequences of expositional dialogue. Character-wise, Hercules is pretty much a big beefcake, but of course he has a heart of gold and the compulsory terrible secret. He is accompanied by a group of walking cliches. In his posse you have the Amazon warrior, the snarky thief, the demented seer, and the boy who wants to grow up and be a great warrior, like Hercules. Oh, and the berserker. Can't forget him. The highlight of this group is probably the seer, Amphiaraos, played by Ian McShane. He has this great wry sense of humour and is pretty much obsessed with when he is going to die. The rest of his crew, you can probably say they do the job effectively, if not particularly spectacularly. As you might expect, it's John Hurt, as Lord Cotus, the King of Thraith, who really stands out performance-wise. But you do get the feeling that he is justifying his actions and his desires a bit too much, which means that some of the stuff you see further down the track comes as a bit of a less of a surprise. And it is these extended explanations done by a number of the characters which is probably the film's biggest downfall. If you're going to have dialogue-heavy anything, you really need the actors behind it who can pull it off. As you can imagine, with people like the Rock there, it doesn't work out all that well. Some of it is done quite entertainingly, some of it works, but generally it's just like, wow, you are just basically explaining the plot so you don't actually have to show anything to cover all this more complicated stuff that's meant to be happening in the background. As you might expect, though, it's really the battle scenes and the fights where this movie excels. It's definitely an action movie first, with a bit of the plot stuff kind of shoehorned in there with a crowbar. Watching these battles, though, I couldn't help but sense a little sense of familiarity with some of the action I was seeing on screen. If you're familiar with the God of War games, then watching this movie you soon realise that it wouldn't have taken much variation to what has been presented to you to turn this from a Hercules movie into a Kratos movie. And I think that a Kratos movie may have worked slightly better, but hey, that's my personal opinion. Now, I will give the filmmakers a little bit of credit here. I mean, there is a big tagline in a lot of the trailers and posters about the man behind the myth. And you can see that they are trying to show Hercules as a human. You never actually get absolute confirmation of his apparent parentage. I mean, the movie starts with, I suppose, a summary of his great tasks and showing him fighting all these mythical beasts. But then towards the end, they actually go motion comic style and replay some of the stuff you see at the front. And I probably would say that that is the cleverest part of this movie. If you do see this movie, don't walk out as the second it finishes. There's a small section, like I said, where they do go this comic book style, very stylized. And I can't help but think that if they had have used the feel of those things in the movie itself, we may have had a slightly better movie on our hands. Really, what you're going to get out of this movie depends on what you're going to expect going into it. If you go in looking for a mythology-filled romp through the legends of ancient Greece, you're going to be disappointed. If you're going to go in looking for a in-depth look behind the myth at who this man might have been, there's a little bit of that there. You can see it's meant to be there, but again, you're probably going to be disappointed. If you go in thinking, I want to go watch The Rock flex his muscles and take on a few hundred people at a time, with some spectacular set pieces and just some unbelievable consequences, well, you probably are going to have a good time with this. Look, in all honesty, I really can't recommend this as a movie to put towards the top of your list. I'd personally suggest waiting until you can get it cheaply on demand or in a bargain bucket at your local video store, assuming you still have one. But it does have one saving grace of being slightly better than the Hercules movie we're going to talk about shortly.
Have faith in yourself. Now tell me, who are you? I am
Well, we finally made it to our Hercules in New York Redeeming Features segment. As I mentioned last podcast, we are giving a couple of tickets away to this one, and if you're listening to this podcast hot off the presses, you still got a little bit of time to enter that competition, since the screening at Room 60 is on September 3rd. Also, due to a very unfortunately busy schedule, Kristian hasn't had a chance to watch this one yet. That's quite okay. He is the king of cult and retro cinema in Brisbane anyway, so, he's not going to be able to get to every single one of these every time. He sends his apologies, and that means that, once again, I am flying solo in the redeeming features section. So what you're going to get this time is a straight and to the point rundown of, I suppose, some of the more interesting and potentially redeeming features of this particular movie, depending on your point of view. Okay guys, sit back, it's going to be quite a ride. Well, first up, and most obviously, this is Arnold Schwarzenegger's movie debut. It was filmed not too long after he became Mr. Universe, way back in 1969. Interestingly, he's not actually credited as Arnold Schwarzenegger in the original version. Apparently the producers were a bit concerned about the length of his surname, so instead called him Arnold Strong with Mr. Universe in quotes afterwards, just in case you weren't so sure. Whether this was meant to give us a comparison or some sort of contrast with his main co-star Arnold staying as Pretzi, who was apparently a bit of a popular comedian around New York at the time. I don't see it from this movie myself, but you never know. Again, the similarities between the names, whether it was on purpose, is pretty unclear. The second point of interest, even before you start watching this movie, is that it's actually a bit of a lottery drawing. In a lot of the more recent prints, you do get to fully appreciate Arnold Schwarzenegger's first attempt at acting in a movie. However, back in the heady days of 1969, the makers of the film were also very concerned about his accent and whether or not the average American theatre goer would actually be able to understand most of his lines. So what you get in the earlier versions of this movie is another actor's voice dubbed over Arnie's. Quite badly, in fact. The lip sync is not all that great, and hearing essentially this radio announcer voice, this thick American announcer voice coming out of Arnie's mouth, is a sight to behold. It must be seen to be believed. You can look on YouTube, of course. There are plenty of scenes and examples of just how bad this dubbing job is. I've also searched high and low, and I cannot find the name of the actor that got to provide the replacement voice. So if anyone out there knows it, please let us know. Because you know what? I'm really curious about this now. I'm hoping it's actually someone who ended up being really, really famous, who is horrendously embarrassed by this particular job that they did. Now, Hercules in New York was also meant to be a family-friendly picture, even though some of the goings-on are a little questionable when looked at with today's eyes, let's just say. More on that later. But from the opening logo of the production company, Film Partners, you'd think it was aimed at something a lot younger. There is this seriously cute, fluffy duck animated logo. You just see this, you're thinking, hang on, I'm about to watch an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie about Hercules coming to New York. It's all live action, yet I'm seeing this adorably cute duck. I have no more to add to that. It is just a truly bizarre sight. Then, of course, we have our meeting with the mighty gods of Greece. Seeing that Hercules is the son of Zeus, what Hercules movie could possibly be made without some scene with the gods themselves? The gods are only really identified on as a plot needs to introduce them basis, and there's quite a few surplus ones there as well that we simply don't know who they are. The range of acting goes from barely serviceable to incredibly poor, and it's also here that you wonder what is actually worse, the original Arnie performance or the overdubbed performance. I tell you what, the general level of performance by the unnamed god characters, mainly being the more, shall we say, nubile female ones, especially when it's combined more with the dubbed version of the movie. You really feel that you're one toga slip away from entering into dodgy 70s porn territory. I know this was made in 69. Hey, it's close enough to 1970 for me to make that comparison. Okay? Look, we're looking for redeeming features here. We're not really splitting hairs. So, let that one slide, okay, guys? If you really want to have fun in this movie, though, make sure you take along someone who is very familiar or very interested or is a student of mythology, who is really into the Greek gods. Seriously, they will probably lose it barely a third away into this movie, because they kind of just pull the gods from here and there as needed. So you got your pantheon of Greek gods made up mainly of Greek and Roman deities. You even have a scene where Atlas, obviously taking a break from his duties of holding up the earth, teams up with Samson, the biblical character, in order to rush in and help Hercules. So I guess you can say the rather incredible attention to detail when it comes to the Greek pantheon is definitely a big tick in this movie's favour. Oh boy. Now, before we move on from the gods, we probably should mention Zeus himself. At one moment, he's this decisive deity, saying, "My word is law," yet it doesn't seem to take a lot for him to change his mind or reconsider. He does lose his temper a few times, and then Zeus is armed with his mighty lightning bolt, which seems to be a rather carefully shaped metal plant pole. He can summon it at will, which is done by the rather clever cinematic device of quickly changing the camera to another section of the scene and then coming back to him holding this lightning bolt. You also never actually see it leave his hand when he throws it. There's a few basic explosion effects, but you never see the thing actually leave his hand. My guess is it was probably a little on the flimsy side, and they only had one of them, so if it got damaged or lost, it would impact on some scenes further in the movie. The film itself was entirely filmed in New York, and a lot of it in Central Park. So you have scenes set in Olympus, and even down in the underworld, where you have a rather interesting sound that you probably wouldn't normally expect to hear associated with the gods. You can actually hear traffic noise and horns honking. It adds a wonderful layer to an already wonderful movie. I'm also thinking that they may have pushed it as a bit of a tourism opportunity to the New York authorities. There is a particular scene where they catch a cab to Central Park, and the secondary character, Pretzi, as mentioned earlier, played by Arnold Stang, says Central Park seriously about 8 or 9 times, pretty much in one breath. I was just watching them thinking, how many times can you fit Central Park into one sentence? If there is a Guinness Book of World Records award for that particular feat, then we all know who holds it. Look, there are so many bizarre instances, occurrences, and scenes within this movie. I could probably go on for absolutely ages if I tried to give you a breakdown of everything from here on in. Now, I think I pretty much have gone through and detailed some of the main redeeming features and some of the main points of interest for revisiting this particular classic, but just to let you know that there is a little bit more for it to offer, let me give you a bit of a summary of some of the other wondrous events that you can expect to experience from Hercules in New York. Hercules showing off his amazing physical prowess by showing up an entire athletics team, and later on fighting a bear that's escaped from the zoo that is obviously a guy in a bear suit, complete with sneakers on his feet. Mobsters who are so cliched that they set new standards of cliched performances in movies. Zeus keeping an eye on Hercules and all his shenanigans on what appears to be a 1950s style cathode tube TV set. Arnie taking seemingly every possible, however hard to justify opportunity to take his shirt off, including a couple where Pretzi seems to take an incredible amount of pleasure of just rubbing his hands all over Arnie's muscles. If you're watching the version with the Arnie dialogue, you actually do get a scene where you get to hear the voice of the actor that dubbed over him in the other version, and a great opportunity to see Zeus mugging mercilessly at the camera. So there you go. A list of reasons why you should see Hercules in New York. Now, if I've managed to convince you, please let me know. I'd love to know what you thought of the movie, and what you think of me for trying to convince you to check this particular one out. Remember, if you are listening to this podcast nice and fresh from its upload, you can still get to Room 60 at West End in Brisbane and see this movie on a bigger screen, with the advantage of being able to have a couple of drinks to help you see it through as well. May turn out to be beneficial. Just saying. If you have any suggestions of movies that you would like us to check out and attempt to redeem, if you really want to give us a true challenge, we're still yet to find one as bad as Blood Rain. Seriously, Blood Rain is the reigning champion of unredeemable films. Then look, send us the details through all the usual channels, which of course I'll be giving you at the end of this podcast. But let's finish off these redeeming features with a bit of a comparison of the voices you can expect to hear depending on which version of the movie you see.
A legendary hero walked godlike upon the earth. Sometimes.
Why can't I go?
Because your place is here with the rest of us.
You let Mars travel.
That's his job, until mankind learns to dispense with his services and lives in peace. Mars must go where he's called.
I only want to browse around.
You'd only get into trouble.
I have been here thousands of years. I am bored.
Don't interrupt your father.
The story begins quietly enough. High atop fabled Mount Olympus, Hercules annoys Zeus just once too often with his need for adventure.
I'm tired of the same old faces, the same old things.
Okay, it's Kristian Fletcher here, and it's interesting being on the, I suppose, the other side of the microphone, interviewing a very special guest on the podcast for this fortnight. Now, this gentleman has been involved with a lot of what I do with music and movie-related events around Brisbane for, well, almost 14 years. We're coming up to in a couple of weeks. 14 years ago, I created Cards for Sorrow, which was the Brisbane chapter of the Rocky Horror Picture Show Floor Show. Now, what this involved was bringing interactive screenings of the movie to life in Brisbane, and including a floor show of over 15 performers bringing the parts to life. Now, I remember a certain ad in, I believe, the Sunday Mail, where we were actually doing it, looking for a call-out. I think at the time we were looking for Eddies and Brads and possibly a Frankenfurter to appear in our cast. Now, this is back in about 2000. Now, one of the gentlemen who actually contacted me was a guy called Trevor Holland. Now, I believe he was going to come in and play the role of Brad, but something happened, and he ended up being our very first Frankenfurter. Now, 14 years later, as mentioned, he has been involved in a lot of what I've done, not just Rocky Horror, but the things that have branched off from that, Blues Brothers, Crybaby, a lot of the other interactive events. But I'm very excited to have on the line Trevor Holland, the creator of the Rufus project, to be talking about a different project. Hello, Trevor.
Hello, Kristian.
This must be weird for you.
This is very, very strange. Definitely.
Hopefully we're on home turf, I suppose, speaking about one of mine and yourselves' favourite obsessions, I suppose.
Oh, yeah, I suppose I kind of like it.
Well, now the Rocky Horror experience, as I've said, you've been going for almost 14 years in the middle of September, and I don't know about yourself, but I can hardly believe it. We've seen so many incarnations of the group. You wouldn't think that a movie that stays the same all these years actually could have, I don't know, so many changes within the cast itself. So, we've seen many things happen. But I think let's go back to, pre-meeting us, Trevor. What about, how did you first get into Rocky Horror in general, or the Rocky Horror Picture Show? Do you have a memory of your first Rocky Horror experience?
Well, yeah, I mean, going way, way, way back, probably my earliest memory is of the soundtrack, particularly the Time Warp. We used to do these family trips, the family road trips up north to see all the various relatives scattered throughout Queensland. And what we normally do at the halfway point is pick up some of the cousins and then keep on going north to visit the grandparents. And one of my older cousins came along on one particular trip and had the Rocky Horror soundtrack on a nice little tape deck that we basically played non-stop in the back of the car. And I loved it. I mean, there's definitely no doubt that I thought this music was absolutely fantastic. I didn't know what a lot of the stuff meant, but, I was pretty young at the time. Fast forward a couple of years, and I finally saw the movie. I was probably a little on the young side to really understand most of the references, and
I think most of us were.
Yeah, and I do remember. I think for a number of years, it took me quite a while to actually, I suppose, like the movie. I liked aspects of the movie, but it was only much later that I found myself actually going, hang on, and just seeing it from a slightly different light, a slightly different angle. And then, kind of getting it. And then I met my wonderful wife, Susie, who's been very supportive over the years, and she loved Rocky Horror, and we started watching it together, learnt that there was all these bizarre people around the place who yelled things back at the movie, and we gradually learnt bits of that, and just from watching it ourselves at home, and occasionally seeing it on screenings, this is all pre-Cards for Sorrow as well, just generally got more and more involved and just built up a bigger appreciation for this amazing movie.
Oh, definitely. And there's so many things that you just said there that, I can relate to. And the fact, it did hit me too one day. The penny just dropped and you're like, hang on, I'm obsessed with this. I love this, and the people that get it, and it's very rare that you find people, to be honest. I've rarely found people that have said they don't like the movie, but then, hey, would I hang out with them? So it's really interesting hearing that you, used to go to screenings. Had you experienced sort of any interactiveness aside from audience participation at the screenings you'd gone to? Pre-Cards for Sorrow?
Well, not really. I mean, you'd occasionally go along and there'd be people dressed up, but they're basically just dressing up for the night out. It was always good when you saw them there because you knew you could actually get away with yelling out some of the lines. I do remember an early experience of going in there and yelling out, "Asshole!" to a reference to Brad, and hearing this, "What was that? What? Who said that?" It's like, oh dear.
And certain ones in the audience probably would have actually gone, I get that. I know what he's saying.
Yeah.
So do you think having that sort of, obviously initial fandom, but the initial sort of experience of having gone to these screenings and gone, wow, this sort of subculture exists, is that what attracted you then when you heard about Cards for Sorrow and the casting of the floor show?
To tell you the truth, it just kind of happened. Again, mentioning Susie, she used to read the paper a lot more thoroughly than I did, back when reading the newspaper was still a thing.
Yeah, gosh.
Am I giving away my age here? Anyway, and
it wasn't that long ago, people.
yeah, and she came across this ad about, if anyone was a fan of the Rocky Horror Show, to send the details to this Kristian Fletcher fellow about putting together this floor show. So I thought, oh yeah, I'll be into that. I was doing a lot of amateur theatre at the time, a couple of semi-professional productions, which basically is defined by the fact that everybody except the actors get paid. And I suppose I was looking at something that I could do that may have been, I suppose, a little less time intensive, rather than having to go through and go to rehearsals 5 nights a week, which can be difficult when you live, say, outside of the CBD a fair way. So yeah, how could I resist not sending off my details to this strange Kristian fella?
But yeah, we're so glad you came on board, Trevor. And as mentioned earlier, I believe that you were going to play Brad, and then I think someone pulled out and were like, hey, would you play Frankenfurter? And just as chilled out as you joined the cast, you were as chilled out by saying, "Yep, I'll step up and wear the black undies and the fishnets." So how did that all sort of eventuate?
I may have appeared chilled out, but I think my internal thought process was like, "Oh my god." I was just hanging around. I just got like this tap on the shoulder, and it was like, "Oh, our Frankenfurter's had to pull out. Do you mind doing it?" I was thinking, how can I say no? And there's a holy crap, I actually said yes. And never looked back, I guess.
And then there was your big premiere. I remember we were at Boggo Road Jail in the September of that year, which is our anniversary in September 2000. And I believe this was the early stages where we didn't even have a cape for you. I found an old red velvet curtain from my mum's and said, "Trevor, drape that around you, that'll do."
Absolutely.
And we froze out in the middle of the Boggo Road. But it was really the first time, Cards for Sorrow sort of first got witnessed. And I don't know if you felt the same, Trev, but I even got a moment even from then that we were onto something. It was bloody awesome and a lot of fun. But I don't think it was until we did that very first screening that it really hit home. Wow, this is a phenomenon. This is something, it's, on my end, something I'm really proud of being able to put together. But, how's it been for you? Like, what's the appeal for you to be coming back for almost 14 years?
Well, it's just the sheer fun. I mean, I still do remember the first time I had to drop the cape in front of the in front of the audience. Probably won't go through my internal monologue at that particular time because I do try to keep the podcast fairly family friendly. Let's just say,
good idea.
A few quick expletives going through my head, followed by shall we say, stuff it. And just the sheer adrenaline rush that hit at that moment, I still remember it so clearly, and I still get that feeling every single time. It's just such a fantastic thing to do, to get up there and invite the audience to join in with a movie that as we mentioned earlier, I consider is a very important movie and a very special movie in a lot of ways. It's one that's pretty much been there in the background for a very large part of my life. So,
oh, definitely, and I think that's that sums up the appeal for I think a lot of people. It meant so many different things to people. Even if it stems from you listening to the soundtrack album in the car all those years ago to someone who's now seeing their parents got it in their DVD collection, So I think it's kept, it's always going to live on. But I don't know, it's so hard to pinpoint. It's known as the ultimate cult movie, and you can never take that title away from it. I don't think. But why do you think? Why is there a cult following? It does link in a bit to what we were talking about. But why do you think there is a cult following with the film? What is that appeal? Why do you think people, with the movie itself rather than the interactive experience?
Again, it's kind of like one of those movies that you kind of discover. I mean, there's not really anybody out there, actively advertising the fact that Rocky Horror exists. It's almost something that spreads by word of mouth. Even with all the interconnectivity between people nowadays, with the net and Facebook and Twitter and everything like that. It's still one of those things. It's just like it spreads, and you find out about Rocky Horror when somebody else introduces you to it. And it just kind of is like a snowball thing. And then, you watch it the first time. Seriously, so many people I talk to about Rocky Horror, they talk about their first experience or the first few times I saw it. They're thinking, it was just this weird movie that we didn't quite get. And then, like I said, you have that moment where you go, hang on. There's something to this, and I think because it's almost like it's like a personal discovery when suddenly Rocky Horror has you in its grasp, and it really does, I suppose, make it a very special movie for people for that reason. It's the one you've got to work it out for yourself, and once you have worked it out, there's no turning back. It has you. You're an addict.
And I think, you shouldn't, I think as Susan Sarandon even said, don't analyse it, just enjoy it, and that's exactly what it is. The whole don't dream it, be it.
I was about to say the same thing.
Yeah. Well, people have been having fun for years, and I honestly think it'll be the movie that, I know it's been included in the Museum of Modern Art in their gallery of, culturally significant films. Well, most of my favourite movies are, which I find is quite cool. but yeah, so, how interesting to be able to look in 100 years from now, and I don't think people will go, what's Rocky Horror? I think it would still have been actively played 100 years from now. I just don't think it will ever die, But now, you've had a chance to experience, it from both angles. Would you say you have the most fun in the audience or on stage with these Rocky Horror interactive screenings?
As much as I appreciate sitting back in the audience, shouting everything out, and watching the events unfold in front of me, being up on stage is still the bigger thrill. Mainly because it also brings in such a possibility of the unexpected. Let's just say, over the past 14 years, things always haven't gone smoothly. Quite a few memorable occasions where props have gone missing, or have bottoms have fallen out of chairs.
At the worst times.
Or full bits of scenery or background have just simply fallen over. I think there was one memorable time at the Botanical Gardens where the film actually melted.
We were that good.
So you combine all this possible chaos with the fact that you're actually trying to put on a performance to supplement the movie itself, and it's a wild ride. And I kind of a bit of Kristian. I don't mind so much when things go wrong. I tend to try to have a bit of fun with that.
Yeah, I think that's the secret is, if you're, and that's what audiences say to me, you can tell the people on stage are having an absolute ball, and that translates like you wouldn't believe, like any form of entertainment. So yeah, I think we don't need to take it so seriously. It needs to be what it is. Which is an ultimate experience where, as Richard O'Brien said, it's the perfect piece of theatre, audience yelling out lines, a movie and live performance as well. What more can you want?
It's all rolled into one.
But now we've mentioned we've branched off and done a few other movies. We've done Blues Brothers, Cry Baby, and more recently Grease as an interactive experience. Now I try and involve you with as many as possible, Trevor, because I don't know, I like to see you pop up in different cameos and all sorts of things in these floor shows. What part will he play next? But I know a film very dear to you is Blues Brothers, and so that's probably been one that you've done I think we've done about three times now. So what is your explain how you feel. What's that like in comparison to Rocky Horror as an interactive?
Yeah, well, Blues Brothers, I guess it's a bit of a different experience because it's focused more on the songs with a couple of key moments, whereas with Rocky we do tend to recreate a bigger portion of the movie. So Blues Brothers is kind of like it's almost like a multi-part performance. So you'll pop up one bit, do the song, get to sit back in the backstage for a while, because there are big stretches in that movie where really not a lot happens. But getting up as Jake, who is definitely up there amongst one of my favourite characters. And yeah, it's just like it's a great experience, and it's a different experience, and it also, I suppose, lets me try to bring a different audience into something that I love, much as like we do with Rocky. And I just want to share this stuff. This stuff's awesome. Everyone here, everyone out there needs to see this stuff and experience this stuff and really let themselves get involved. And yeah, if there's somebody up on stage lip syncing along to one of the songs, damn right you should sing along. Get up and dance and just join the party. It's so much fun.
Because that's what people need to realise. The people that are up on stage reenacting these movies are diehard fans like the people in the audience as well. They've just taken that extra step. So get up there, dance and sing along. But I know definitely by experiencing all the different movies that we've done, there's definitely a totally different audience for each of them. And look at the recent Grease screening. It seemed a lot more family orientated, obviously being Grease. But, how did that compare?
Well, that was good. I think because it definitely got like a very, very different audience. I mean, I'm sure there were a significant number of people who were aware of our other. Well, I almost hate to call it work because it's fun. But I think a lot of people were coming along not really knowing fully what to expect. So, I mean, I would have liked to have seen more people getting up and dancing and singing along. I did see some of that going on in the audience in a fairly lower key sort of way. But yeah, the fact that it did bring in that much wider audience, and I mean, I was a bit concerned about bringing my kids along, and then I saw that one lady brought along about like a half a dozen kids, some of them younger than my youngest, and I was like, okay, I don't feel so bad now. I'm not subjecting my kids to something that may scar them in the future. But again, I mean, Greece being the first time that we'd actually attempted that particular screening, that itself adds a new layer and a new level of excitement, because you're trying something fresh, you're breaking new ground, and it's like, well, this is either going to work or not, and this is our chance to prove that this is something that we will be able to do again, and I really do want to do it again.
Oh, definitely, and that in being able to, we've now got the audiences sort of crossing over, like you were saying about, you probably got people coming from our normal Rocky screenings. Like I even had people contacting me saying, do people yell out at these screenings of Grease? And I'm like, well, not to my knowledge, except it might only be the lyrics to the songs. But the interesting thing from doing Grease, I've noticed now a lot of people, having gone to the screening a couple of weeks ago, are now booking to come to Rocky Horror, because it's opened this whole world of this floor show and this interactive screening. Because I also do think, a few people have told me the word interactive does scare them off. They think it's going to be them pulled out of their seats and dragged up on stage. But I'm not a fan of that myself, so I'd never do it. So I think you're more than welcome to do it in the aisles. So, but yeah, no, I definitely think interactive sums up what we do, because it's it's taking a movie that's Rocky Horror's 40 next year, taking a movie and you can still put it in a light that's fresh and, as fresh as watching the stage show live in front of you. So, I definitely think it's an experience that can't be beat. So, well, being involved with Grease and Blues Brothers and Rocky Horror and Crybaby and all these other screenings, it's, it's interesting that, in 2 weeks' time, we're coming back to the one that we all started with, which is Rocky Horror 14 years later. Now, you started off as our Frankenfurter, and you, I think, then went on to be our criminologist, and then you've been playing our in-house riffraff for a few years now. So, what, performing or otherwise, what's your favourite character from Rocky Horror, and what sort of, what can you relate to the most, I suppose?
I was so dreading this question, and yeah,
it always comes up with me. I know. I always get stuck on it, and I say something like Magenta, and it throws people off because they're like, "Oh, I thought you'd say Brad." But yeah, so maybe look at it from a performing angle. What do you have the most fun? Learning the ins and outs of character-wise.
I've got to admit, I do really enjoy playing Riff Raff. I probably because, that was a character that Richard O'Brien basically wrote for himself. So he seems to be this very nasty piece of work on the surface, but you dig down a little bit lower, and he is a bit more of a complex character, and he kind of gradually transforms into what he ends up being by the end of the movie, pretty much by the way that Frank just, gradually mistreats him more and more throughout the movie. But saying that, seriously, I have a great love for a number of the characters in there. I mean, Frank himself, with just the boundless confidence and the such confidence in his sexuality and the way he behaves. Then you've got Magenta, who was just a delight to watch, particularly portrayed by Patricia Quinn. Columbia is so fun and bubbly, but then she herself has a big change later on, and it's just like, well, damn it, she can actually be quite a serious character. So, in answer to your question, I don't have a favourite character, and I'm happy to stand by that.
Oh, no, that's good. So you even like the criminologist and Dr. Scott, they're up there as well?
Yeah, well, the criminologist, Dr. Scott, you can have so much fun with their lines.
Oh, definitely. I think if they weren't there, we wouldn't have half of the audience participation that exists. But well, it's been an absolute pleasure interviewing you, Trevor, and having you involved with all these projects over the last almost 14 years, and here's to another 14.
Oh dear Lord. Probably going to get to the point where I can only play the criminologist. Or Dr. Scott, because I'll be
I was going to say, it probably goes from the criminologist to Dr. Scott. And then it'll get to the stage where the entire cast is Dr. Scott.
yeah. I'll be the skeleton in the clock.
And I'll be like, there's Trevor making his cameo. Well, thank you, Trevor. I look forward to performing with you on the 19th of September at the Chanel with the interactive Rocky Horror Picture Show screening with live floor show.
Absolutely. So that was September 19 at the Chanel for the Rocky Horror Picture Show with live floor show featuring Cards for Sorrow. You might see me as Riff Raff and Kristian as Brad.
Just maybe.
Just maybe.
As we enter September, it's time to chat about some of the upcoming events that I have throughout the month. Anything to keep you movie lovers, and I suppose music movie lovers, intrigued. As we've mentioned elsewhere on the podcast, Hercules in New York is screening on Wednesday the 3rd of September at Room 60, Kelvin Grove, Urban Village, if you want to revisit, unfortunately, Arnold Schwarzenegger's very first movie from 1969. If sci-fi is more your kind of thing, on the same night at New Globe Theatre in Fortitude Valley, they are screening the Bruce Willis film Fifth Element at 6:30 p.m. On Thursday the 4th at New Globe Theatre, we launch Trauma Thursdays, the best in offbeat, gross, gory, trashy films. To kick it off, we have Cannibal the Musical from 1993, which is probably more of a light-hearted trauma film compared to a lot of the movies in their back catalogue. It has the great pedigree of being created by the people who wrote South Park and the movie Orgasmo. That's screening on Thursday the 4th at 6:30 p.m. Tickets are available at the door for $10 for that one. If you'd like a bit of 80s horror, why not stepping back to 1981 with the original Evil Dead starring Bruce Campbell? Friday the 5th of September at 7 p.m. Why not start your weekend with a classic horror movie? Let's go back a bit further to the 1950s and 1960s with a jukebox dance party happening at the Port Office Hotel on Saturday the 6th of September. This is running from 5 till 8 p.m. Entry is only $5 and you can dance the night away to 2 decades of classic hits. Also mentioned elsewhere on the podcast, we're excited to announce the 40th anniversary screening of the newly remastered Phantom of the Paradise from 1974. Before there was the Rocky Horror Picture Show, there was this, the ultimate glam rock musical, screening Friday the 12th of September at New Globe Theatre, 7 p.m. And if you feel like getting in a bit early to book your tickets for the Rocky Horror Picture Show, you'd better do so. Tickets are selling fast for Friday the 19th of September at Chanel Theatre at 8 p.m. See the iconic 1975 cult movie brought to life alongside a screening with a floor show by the infamous fan troupe Cards for Sorrow. This is definitely the only way you should experience this movie. Many more great events happening throughout September and going through to the end of the year. For full details about upcoming events, visit www.christianfletcher.com. I look forward to seeing you at a cinema very soon.
I am super excited to be announcing that we have 2 competitions, 2 great giveaways for you with this particular podcast. And both are 2 absolute classic movie screenings. Firstly, we have a double pass to see Phantom of the Paradise at the New Globe Theatre in Fortitude Valley on the 12th of September. To win this great double pass, you just need to leave the comment Phoenix. For our other competition, well, I'm sure you can guess from our interview, we have a double pass to the fantastic interactive screening of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, featuring Cards for Sorrow at the Chanel Cinema at the University of Queensland St. Lucia on September 19th. To win this great prize, simply leave the comment Janet in any of the usual places. If you want to know the usual places, I'll be listing them at the end of the podcast, or you can check out the description down below. Good luck and hope to see you at one of these fantastic screenings. Thanks so much for listening to the Rufus Project. We hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as we enjoyed putting it together. As always, if you want to send your competition entries through or leave us some feedback, comments or requests, you can contact us by hitting up the Rufus Project on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Ustream, or even leave us a review on iTunes, or hey, you could even visit our homepage at therufusproject.podomatic.com and leave a comment there. We're also always keen to hear from anyone who feels they have something for our local wildlife section. Again, contact us by the previous mentioned channels, or if you want to be a bit more private, you can send us an email to rufusreviews@gmail.com. Don't forget that we're also after suggestions for sign-outs of the podcast, so definitely send your suggestions through to us as well. With that in mind, until next time, dun dun dun! Thanks, Josh. See you next time. After watching Hercules in New York and finding those clips of Arnie dubbed by that terrible, terrible American voice actor, I just have the strangest urge to go back and find famous key scenes of Arnie in his bigger blockbusters and redub it, preferably with the pepper pot lady voice used in Monty Python, so you have stuff like, "Oh, get to the chopper!" Or even better, "I'll be back from the shops very soon. Oh dear."